under rather than the daily show that happens at, 2 o'clock in the morning for us. So this is much more comfortable at midday to be doing extra hours. We've assembled a couple of people for us to have a discussion and to take on some of your questions. So you can join if you're watching on YouTube. And what is all this all about? officehours.global. You can go to and /join, officehours.global/join, and that's where you'll find all these links and things to be able to ask questions. So hopefully you will be able to put a few questions in. We tend to take a little bit longer in our discussions, extra hours, and so we'll have a little think about what we're talking about. First of all, the regulars that we've had before from Hollywood, California, is Courtney Goodman. Hello, Courtney.
Hello, Grant. How are you down under in our, in the Southern Hemisphere? We get a lot of Southern Hemispherics here on the panel today.
Yes, well, particularly
yes.
I try to fill it out with people from down under because it's a more comfortable time slot. So, and to that point, we have Carl Asmussen in Adelaide.
Good afternoon. It's just lunchtime here in Adelaide, so it's really nice weather. So we're just about to get into summer here. So being mid-November, late November. So we just had the Adelaide 500, which is the big car race. Just think like the Indy 500. We just had that in Adelaide. So I just had F-18s flying over my house for 2 days. Literally flying over my house. My house is like maybe 1 or 2 kilometers from the track. So, and the flight path is directly over my house. So I couldn't actually do anything for like maybe 20 minutes there where I was trying to listen to what I was editing video, and I couldn't edit video because I couldn't hear what I was doing. So I just gave up for 20 minutes and made a sandwich. But yeah.
There's a lot of noise on these videos for some reason. They're just, I don't know. The noise reduction's not working. I just can't get this sound out. It's just so loud.
Literally my roof was shaking, let alone noise reduction.
Right. Yeah, it would have been. Very good. Well, it's nice to have you here. We'll see how the questions go. On the first couple of episodes of Extra Hours, we did have ChatGPT trivia versus Carl, and we may have to pull that out again at the end of the show. We'll see how we go. I mean, spoiler alert: Carl wins. It's just basically what happens. So we'll see what happens there. But for the first time ever debuting on Extra Hours is we have Tucker Dragoo from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Is that right?
Oklahoma City. Close enough.
Oklahoma City. Okay, not Tulsa. You know where I'm thinking of Tulsa is
our mutual friend.
Well, yes, no, but I was also thinking of Sylvester Stallone's show, Tulsa. I was watching that recently. Well, that second season's pretty ordinary. I don't think it's as good as the first season. Anyway,
nice.
It hasn't affected my feelings of Oklahoma though. So I will still like to visit at some point. So Tucker, you have been around office hours for a couple of years, 3 years, like pretty early on, wasn't it? Really.
I think it was a few months in. Yeah, it was pretty early on whenever I came in. And it's funny because we were just chatting about this before the show, but my first office hours was one of the few evening shows back in the day, a couple months into, the change of the world. So yeah, it's good to be back. Good to be here. And I'm one of many whose lives have been changed by office hours. So pretty cool.
Yeah. So how did you stumble across office hours? Same way we all did, probably.
Yeah, I mean, same way I think a lot of people did. It was just one of those random, pandemic evenings at home trying to figure out what's going to happen with life, surfing, and just found a random post on Facebook of like, hey, jump in. We're going to some like-minded people going to be talking about some production-y things. And it's like, I'm a production guy that needs to be solving problems and is not solving problems. And it gave me a good outlet. So yeah, it was really good.
It was like my head's about to explode because it has no outlet. It has no problem solving. So what does work look like for you these days? What type of stuff sort of projects are you involved in?
Yeah, so I've got a cloud-based engineering firm. Effectively, we build AWS infrastructure for broadcasters, and we also provide an infrastructure. So we have studios that are available. So most of my days are working on that infrastructure, validating workflows, coming up with new workflows. I also do a good amount of on-premise engineering. So I came up through audio. I tend to do a whole lot more video engineering just because in the regional area where I work, there's a lot more audio people than video people. So I've kind of taken that on. A lot of system diagrams, lots of, come up with ways to make sure that people are comfortable, both techs and talent. And that's really what I do.
And so what would be the split between, sort of cloud or online versus, in person or on premises stuff?
That's a great question and a really hard one to answer. It depends on the time of year, because things kind of fluctuate differently between both businesses. Um, I'd say it's probably 70 or 80% is cloud-based, and then the remainder is kind of filling in with on-prem as I need to.
And with the cloud work you've done, you've messed around with a bunch of different platforms and sort of software, and all AWS seems to be the place that you've landed, but lots of vMix, yeah, and you sort of playing around with other things as well.
Yeah, a lot of vMix. I mean, our workflows are based on we really look at what's the job that needs to be done, and then we make sure and find the solution that fits with that really cleanly. And vMix has really checked the bill on that for the most part. We are looking at other options that are out there now. There's a lot more tools available now than there were whenever we first started, so it's good.
What would you say? What would be the reason to steer away from vMix? As in, it's not so much about the weaknesses of vMix, but more what are the areas that it's lacking in or missing that you find yourself looking for?
It's a great question. So I feel this way about several different tools that do a lot for you. And vMix is one of those where you can do everything in it. Like you could import your slides, you could play your videos out, you could do all your lower thirds in there, you could do replay if you want to. I mean, it can do all of the things, including doing all of your audio processing and audio mixing. And that's really good at certain points. But in a lot of ways, we want to separate those duties out and make sure that we don't overload any one technician. So we always work to make sure that there's a minimum of two people working on a project. And with vMix, when we're in 2, 3, or 4 technicians, you kind of have 4 people with hands into that same system. And we've come up with workflows that make sure they're not stepping on each other. But that's one of the big limitations in vMix that I see is being able to split those workloads out and have a person that's handling audio handle audio and not have to say, TD, take your hands off while we handle this. But with Companion and we do a lot of MIDI over the internet. We do a lot of different solutions that make sure that that's not the case. But still, yeah.
Yeah, we've worked on some projects together, which has been awesome. And it has been nice to have a little bouncing ping pong ball on our touch mixers going up and down and making that move from the other side of the globe.
That's always fun.
Keeps us entertained. Yeah, exactly.
Right. When you do 3 and 4 day shows where you're going and going and going, it's nice to have something just watching like, oh, in Adelaide or in California or somewhere, we just like pop up some spare faders and push that ping pong ball off. It's always good for a laugh.
Yeah. Very good. Well, it's nice to have you here. We have a couple of questions coming in, and I think people. I can see a few people, Brian and Lois, and Tom, Craig, and Mickey. Nice to have you all along for the ride tonight. So be sure to put in some questions. You kind of know our panel now. There's a bit of mutual admiration going on between Tucker and Mickey, which is nice. But Courtney, we've got a couple of questions there. What's our first one?
All right. First one comes in from down in Austin, Texas. Paul Wallace wants to know about the Roland Bridgecast 1. It's only $179, and it's really good. It's a voice changer, mixer, flexible, and there's more. Excited or not? He has a link there.
Carl, what do you know about it?
So this is one of three. There's a series of three here. This is essentially the smallest and the least capable of them for these bridge. So if you go to just put in Roland Bridge, you'll see the three that I'm talking about. So essentially, this one is I think this one's more designed for people who don't want to have to learn how to use like a mixer or a more complicated audio interface. Essentially, what it is, it's a mute unmute. That's pretty much it, and you can control the volume of your headphones and control the volume of the your inputs. So, but if you see, I'll bring it up here. So if you see that it's very basic, just has one knob for how loud something is. Then you have simply mutes. So you have a mute for your mic, you have a mute for what's called chat, and you have a mute for the game. So essentially this, you can tell by what they've actually printed on here, what it's designed for and who it's designed for. And then on the back, you can see you have a microphone input. You have auxiliary input coming in from maybe a game console or a headset input as well. But then you have this USB. So the USB, of course, is bidirectional. So you can have USB coming in from, this will also work with a game console. So you can put this into a PS5 and it will work with that as well. So just heads up, this is actually a fully integrated, it doesn't really require any software. You can use software, of course, to change the color of the lights and stuff, but it can be a standalone product. But yeah, so if you look at the series, this is the least capable of the series. There are other ones that are much more capable. But yeah, it's pretty much a straightforward audio interface for people who don't want to be bothered with an audio interface. Is the easiest way of putting it.
Okay. Courtney, what do you think?
What does the voice changer sound like, Carl? Do you know?
Does it allow you to change your voice?
Oh, man.
It'd be something like that, Courtney. You're exactly right. So
Yeah.
Yes, but there's only one button. See, I've got a whole panel of them.
that's where the other
you-
ones come in. So there are other ones in this series, in the Bridge series, that do have a lot more buttons and a lot more features. But yeah, this one's a bit more basic.
So,
Does it say whether it is one of the question I had? Does it say if it's a 32-bit float interface over USB-C?
No, well, so nothing can be a 32-bit float interface for live. It has 32-bit float processing, so the
live.
voice changing inside will be 32-bit float. But the actual bringing in something live 32-bit float doesn't make any sense. It has to be integer. So and this is the same with the MixPre 3, you must set it to integer on the audio interface for it to actually work with as an audio interface. But it does have 32-bit float processing for all that.
Not live streaming, then you could use the 32-bit float.
Well, the 32-bit float is essentially like a raw version of audio. So you can't actually listen to 32-bit float in any system. You put it into a software that understands 32-bit float and it will convert it to integer format. That could be 32-bit integer or 24-bit integer or 16, but it needs to be formatted. And essentially that gives you the flexibility to change levels. Essentially, it's just much more granular. You're hitting the limit of your hardware. So you're actually hitting the limit of the analog preamp and all those kind of things before you hit the limit of the digital signal. And you're hitting the limit of the analog to digital converters as well. But it does have 32-bit float processing, but that's true for nearly anything that has processing like an X32 or a plugin on GarageBand. They all have 32-bit float processing. What it means is it simply converts it to this raw format, processes it, and then puts it back into an integer format. So 32-bit float is a bit of a misnomer in the industry saying it's like a format. It's not a format. It's just a raw version. It's like a raw photograph. Raw photograph can't be viewed on anything until it's turned into either a bitmap or a JPEG or a TIFF. So it's useless. It's just zeros and ones.
might be preaching to the choir there, Carl, as you talk to Courtney. I was hoping that some of the haven't you been a member of SMPTE or something for a million years, Courtney?
Yeah, I'm a life member now. They don't even charge me dues anymore. They said, "Oh,
Look at that."
There
There you go.
Something like 40 years. I don't know. And they forget about you and they stop charging you dues.
So I think, I mean, where people think about 32-bit float is in the recording process, right? So as in that's where it becomes,
Right.
particularly helpful.
That's what that's what I really meant, is instead of streaming, like Audacity has 32-bit float, I think is its normal recording format. If you could use it as your interface for your microphone to your computer, if it would come in at 32-bit float and then record, it still wouldn't. It would convert it to 24-bit. So
it's got to be integer coming in. Yep, because it has to be US. What's it? UVA.
It could be 32-bit integers.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I was wondering.
32-bit
Can it
integer
not
is what
be-
that's what my flow rate does. My flow rate is a 32-bit integer,
Mhm.
but floating point no. So float, you can hand off, as you said, you can hand off the raw format into a DAW, and then that DAW will do the convert into integer, so you can hear it. You can't actually listen
Right.
to 30-bit float, of course, but you're right. You can. It's the same with raw recording. So raw recording out of a camera into like an Atomos. So that essentially you can't plug that raw video into a monitor and watch it, but you can put it into the Atomos recorder, and then the Atomos will do internally. It can actually stream it out, and it will come out as like a 10-bit integer, video, 8-bit video. So it's similar to video in a way. You can't actually view raw video, but you can send it between two devices as long as the two devices understand what what they're sending and what they're hearing. So yeah, that's right.
Well, I think we're not splitting hairs; we're splitting bits, and I like it,
Bytes.
Mickey.
Yeah.
We're splitting bytes. Well, now
3 bytes
you're-
versus 4 bytes. It
Yeah.
is 24. It is.
how many bits
goes 1 byte more?
Well, I think that my analogy stands, that I was splitting bits because I'm like, how can you split a bit, and how can you split a hair? Can we split bits? We go half is not. It's not a 0 or 1. It's 0.5.
We
Yeah,
can,
bit
but
is
now
a-
we're getting to quantum computing. So
Yeah, quantum
There we
computing
go.
does have 3 states or 4 states. Yes.
Mickey said, I don't think I've heard of a mixer that has 32-bit float mix engine, 32-bit integer, 48-bit, 64-bit, 128-bit. Yes, but not 32-bit float. Which is that's what.
yeah. So the
you're
x32 is 32-bit float processing. So when you're doing like compression and stuff inside of it, it uses the DSP inside of it. It's doing 32-bit float, and then it converts it back to whatever you choose to go out at, 16 or 24, I believe. It's a limitation on the x32. But the processing engine inside, the DSP inside of it, converts it all to 30. And this is no different to plugins in a DAW. So it's the same thing. Just one's doing it using a CPU, one's doing it using DSP inside of a hardware. So there's no difference. Where it gets a little bit confusing is when you take a look at the, the ATEM microphone converter. That's where it gets really confusing, because now we're getting to a real weird world of having 8 different, each channel has 8 DSPs. 8 DSPs, including 8 analog to digital converters. So that kind of product gets we're into really different territory there. But it outputs integer as well. It simply outputs MADI, which would be 2448. So, or MADI can be 2496 as well. But yeah, so but this is kind of the processing. Most processors inside are just off the shelf. There's like 6 or 7 companies that make these audio DSPs, and they all do some version of integer. When they're actually converting it to do the processing, it does the processing, then it converts it back into an integer to hand it back out. You do have some mixers that can actually handle DSP in the mixing. The mixing DSP is also float. So this is true for merging. So merging that does DSP in the actual devices, they can actually do a float when they actually do the mixing, and then once the 2 channels are mixed together, then it comes back out as integer. So there are a few that do that as well, but it's more of a processing thing. So when you're doing compression, EQ, that kind of stuff, it's you can put it in the float. Back in the old days, you can keep it in integer, of course, if you want to, not a problem, but you'll have less resolution. There's less resolution as far as harmonics and stuff. So it's got more to do with harmonics when you put into digital. That's all.
At the end of the day, I think what happens as they go up and up and up is it allows people to have worse and worse and worse gain structure and still get away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incorrect gain structure. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, totally. Well, sparked some interesting conversation. Mickey, what I'm enjoying is that people picking up each other on just a little bit of niggling back and forth. It's like,
Yeah, so
Mickey, sorry, I should have stated hardware mixer pushing back on Tucker. Not a software mixer of the waves.
I have to say,
What?
Waves LV1 does have the new Classic, which is a hardware mixer. Is any mixer really hardware these days? I mean, yes, there
There you
are
go.
hardware mixers, but just saying.
Yeah, the analog mixers, they're all just hardware.
You know what was great about those? Sync was perfect.
Yeah, yeah. I got to use a Heritage 3000. I think was the biggest one that I mixed on, and gee, it was nice.
Yeah.
I think it did help, and I'm sure that kids these days won't be learning on an analog mixer, but I think it helped the understanding of routing and and signal flow and processing made so much sense when you can see everything in front of you.
Yeah, my experience with mixers goes all the way back to germanium transistors. And that's back when you turned a pot and you could hear it go.
Yeah, right.
Audio actually ran through the pot rather than through a VCA.
If I teach anyone, I still go back and find or pull out an analog console, and I'm like, we're starting here, because like it's too easy to get dropped into like, well, compressor, what kind of, it's like, no.
Yeah.
Input level, gain structure, move forward.
That's right. Yeah, trying to avoid any menu diving. So if you want to teach them
Yeah.
without menu diving, then that's a very good
Yeah.
way to start. And then
Make
once
it
I
sound
understand
good
the
with one
process,
sweepable EQ.
yeah, because then
Yeah.
they every time they'll get onto like a digital or a software mixer, they can relate it back to that analog mixer and go, okay,
For
I
sure.
understand what's going on now.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things about something like the Heritage was flipping your auxiliaries pre and post fade per channel. And like when you could do that per channel, that was like the game changer. It was like, to be able to see that. Now, of course, most digital mixers can do that in various ways. Sometimes it's tricky to find how to do that. And you get the overlapping pre and post for the whole channel or individual, or for the whole bus or for the individual channels is a trap for young players. But Jeff has a PM 3000 sitting in a case in the back of the shop. I need to pull it out, put it in the back of your shop. Be nice. Okay, cool. Next question.
All right, next one comes in from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Seattle, Washington. Hello, Tucker. Sorry, mail call. Hello, Tucker. Great to see you. Do you see the cloud workflow moving into the traditional broadcast space, or is it mostly special events and streaming?
100%. Yes. It's all major broadcasters are considering and working on what does this look like? What's the workflow? Because they all see the benefits that the long-term benefits that do exist with the workflow. And none of them, it's almost like AI for broadcasters. It's one of those things where it's like, we know that if we don't stay up and don't start at least considering it, then somebody else will, and that'll give us a disadvantage. So the advantages are massive. They're doing it in a very different way as far as like when you say the cloud workflow, like there are lots of different cloud workflows, and they are all working on their own version and how that works. So yes is the answer.
Something we missed out when I was quizzing you at the start, Tucker, was you're working on the Olympics. You've worked on a couple now, is that right?
Yeah, 3 so far. Been very, very fortunate.
In what department, sort of what area were you working?
So I work with Joe Wasser in the commentary systems. So I'm kind of, I always go in and there's always a question at the end of like, hey, where would you prefer to be in this area or this area? Not that like our preferences are always listened to or heard, but they always do like to give you at least get the feedback of where you'd like to be. And my answer is always wherever you can put me that lowers your stress, put me there. And so I've been really fortunate to get to kind of move around in the commentary and commentary switching environment and kind of learn the space, learn, you know, the relationships and the workflows and the systems. It's been an awesome opportunity.
So in that, that's the like audio processing routing of the commentary teams and different, is that what that is? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you, the way I usually tell it is that if you ever are watching your local sport that you like, whatever it is, football, soccer,
Right.
anything, there's typically two sets of commentators at any given sport. There's the home team's commentators and the away team's commentators, and that's usually a color and a color commentator and a play-by-play for each side. And so each one, those feeds go back to their, you know, their broadcast trucks. They get mixed in with the program, and that goes out. For the Olympics and for any sport where you have, you know, a whole lot of different groups that are involved in it, you've got color and play-by-play, potentially both of those positions. Sometimes it's just one, but for every country that's invested in that sport. So you can have 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 positions for any given sport. And so if you consider that the amount of infrastructure required for that to happen, traditional broadcast, that would be, you know, each, you know, home and away carries their own infrastructure. They may share some resources, but, you know, effectively you have two sets of infrastructure laying down. We can't have 40, 50, 60, 80 sets of infrastructure laid down. So it's a common infrastructure that we provide. And we manage their signals coming back from the host broadcaster and then going back, going to them. So yeah, signals going both ways. It winds up being, you know, 5,000-6,000 signals. It's a lot of audio moving a lot of places.
Are the commentators usually at the venue, or are they always remote? Or are they usually remote?
So we have positions in venue that are bookable positions. So people have they've made arrangements and they've basically bought the space and the resources for their positions. They do also have a location in the IBC that they can go and book that location, and there they get the world feed in front of them along with having the resources to do commentary from there. So they can do either of those two. And then there's also options for the feeds to go offsite and get, you know, have remote commentary and that sort of thing. But from what our teams manage, it is the physical on-site aspect of it.
And so there would be options for sort of a commentary box that would be potentially like an audio only, I guess, right? Like where they can just sit, it has no cameras, it's not set up for that, it's just for commentary. And then there might be commentary positions that are also video set up for video too. Would that be right?
To a point. I mean, it's so each, yeah, depends on the sport, depends on what kind of coverage is required for it. I've done judo, wrestling, and karate as far as being in venue, and then I've also been in the switching center. For judo, wrestling, and karate, those are multi-mat sports, so you have multiple areas of play happening at the same time. So you have 2 or 3 broadcasts that can be going out of the venue. And so in our situation, they wind up with we call it a CATV system. It's not cable TV anymore. It's IP based, but there's a system where they have channels they can change between, and those channels give them the TV sound, so international sound for television, for each individual mat, which is kind of the close mic, so they hear the impacts and things, along with seeing that mat's broadcast, so they can commentate with whichever of the 3 that are active. So that's kind of a core function that exists. And then they can book additional resources as far as, you know, they can bring, you know, have video feeds brought. They can have video, like IP for video leaving. So sometimes people bring their own codecs, and there's a whole host of things, but it's all based on a standard kind of list of like, you get this, or this.
That's incredible.
Does latency ever play a major part in doing that, since the video may be coming in from a variety of different paths to those commentators? Do they ever get out of sync with, oh, look at that throw, and it hasn't happened yet?
Right. That's a great question. I'll say that latency of every piece of everything from beginning to end is known and calculated for throughout. So it is a well managed piece of the puzzle for sure.
So you know the latency of their audio signal plus the latency of the video signal coming from the venue to their location wherever they are. So you know how late their video is that they're seeing.
Yes.
Versus plus the sum of the latency of their audio.
Yep.
Yeah, I noticed, and I'm sure it's just different for every broadcaster, but I noticed watching some where if I ever saw that it was out of sync, commentary to video, it was always commentary was arriving first, which seemed weird to me, right? So you would, and I actually think is the least preferable. I think it's better for the commentary to be late than it to be early, because if you're calling a goal or something and you get that before you see it happen, it's just spoilers all the way through,
Right. And to be clear on how that works, we provide the circuits, the path, we provide all of the elements. The broadcaster puts those elements together as they will.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we manage the feeds, we provide the circuits. We're responsible for the quality of that circuit and for the functionality of the circuit. But again, when they put it back together, it's their product to broadcast.
Yeah.
So there's always somebody you can point the finger at. Hey, it was in sync when it left here. Yeah.
And so it can literally be that you can have one match game something, and the very next one that happens, you could have two outgoing commentary teams and two incoming commentary teams for a particular game or something, right? That's possible? Lots of turnover.
Yeah, there is, but we're not rotating through, like the commentators and the broadcasters manage that as far as who's sitting in the seat. And each station books, typically it's again way before the games, they book their positions. So they've got this is the commentary box for, the BBC, whoever, anyone. It's theirs typically from beginning to end. So, most of the time they'll set for the entire games, including
that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So they said, so each you're not going to have like the BBC walk in and use this position and then they leave and RAI comes in and sits down in the same seats. That's not the case. Yeah.
That's how I was pitching it. So picturing it. So that makes
gotcha. There are bookable positions. So there are positions that you can buy and those are routable positions. But you consider again with that, the number of circuits that are being dealt with, they don't want to be making active routes. Like if static it all up, get the route in place, fax it many, many, many times over, and that route stays. It gets tested every day, but it stays. Now there are again those bookable positions, and those are daily routes and hour by hour routes depending on what's happening. Yeah. So if there's a country that doesn't expect to do well in a sport, all of a sudden they're doing well, they hadn't booked a position before the games, they can book a position, and then there's multiple bookables depending on the sport. So
that's incredible. It's just the logistics on so many levels of the whole thing is so from a technical point of view, it's incredible, right? But
the tech's not the hard part. It's the logistics. Yeah, right. They've built an incredible system. It really, coming into it and looking at the scale of it and how they've managed it, it's amazing. It's simplicity at scale. Like the difficulty is definitely the scale.
So is it the same for winter? Is it basically the same people for winter and summer? And so in a sense,
smaller. So winter, there's fewer venues to work with in winter. So it's one of those things like if somebody says, are you going to the next one? I don't know. I have no idea.
Gotcha.
They'll contract when they contract on that. And but as far as it's a smaller team. you typically wind up with, people who, were managers might be just, technicians at that point, because again, it's a smaller team.
Yeah.
I
Well,
feel very fortunate to have gotten to do winter and summer. So
that's really cool. Hopefully you're still wanting to do it, and they're calling on you for Brisbane in 32. You can come down to Australia, and
I'll
but
hold
actually,
my
I
breath.
mean,
Brisbane's one that I really want to be too. Yeah.
well, we got to get you here before then anyway, right? Like that just is ridiculous. You got to come down under before that.
Have Makita will travel.
Yeah, nice. All right, next question.
Next one comes in from Lois Richter in Davis, California. And she says, assuming a person is going to record a community event and has never before done that, how would you recommend that they learn what to do? They're not producing it, just recording it. Are there any tutorials or classes you would recommend?
I instantly have follow-up questions because I'm thinking about just audio or video, audio and video.
I think in any case, it's really find something that is similar but lower stakes and get out and start doing it. There's obviously a million people on YouTube and a million people that will say, here's how you do this sort of thing. Honestly, if you're not in Discord, join Discord, ask around. There will be a lot of good information there, but it's really going to be a matter of, if you're doing audio only or if you're doing audio and video, there's different equipment requirements there. What's the desired product quality at the end? And then find where you get there, whether you're renting or buying, and make sure that you have the opportunity to get experience prior to doing it. Make some mistakes because you will. And especially with recording, backups are good. Make sure you've got at least something that's, not a throwaway backup, but something that gives you a passable product that you can leave rolling the entire time.
Yeah. She did just say it is video. Yeah, that's interesting, Carl.
So what I would suggest, if you haven't done this before, you want at least 2 cameras if you're doing video, just in case one dies or battery dies, whatever, so you can cut to something else. But remember, video and audio are separate. So you're going to want audio at the person talking. So that would be like a lapel mic into a recorder, body pack recorder, or you're recording the lectern mic directly. You do not want to use the audio coming into the cameras. You want to use that for syncing. So this is the whole. So what you essentially need to do is you want to grab the ingredients to make the product in an NLE, in Final Cut Pro, in DaVinci Resolve. So essentially what you need is an ingredient list. So you want at least 2 cameras. So if one camera has to be moved, if one camera shuts down, what if someone trips over a cable and unplugs the camera, you have the other camera recording. That's all right. They can be like, one can be a tighter shot, one can be a medium shot. That doesn't matter too much. But at minimum 2 cameras, and you want to have a audio recording that is separate from the video cameras. So this can be a body pack on the person recording, or you're actually recording the actual lectern mic or whatever mic they're using. You're recording that directly from the board. So you may need to speak to the person who's running the PA system and simply just record a 2-channel off the board. That's the minimum. That's probably the minimum requirements. But essentially, what you don't need to worry about getting everything perfect on the day. You just need to make sure you get all the ingredients on the day, because you bring it into an editor, and then the editor will help you, or you can do it yourself, and you're simply just going to edit them together. And so you can cover a lot of faux pas. Camera goes out of focus, or the camera falls over, and then you can go to the other camera. If the audio, so you do kind of want a little bit of backup with an audio in a way. So sometimes it's good if you can get a body pack on the person with a lapel mic and use the PA system, just because when people hold like a handheld microphone, they actually may put their hand over where the actual radio transceiver is, and it will cut out for people in the room. That will also cut out for you if they're recording on the board. So having a second recording. So you kind of do want 2 audio recordings, but that's like a body pack. And this is like a Tascam recorder or a Zoom recorder they can wear on their belt. That's a good way of doing it. Don't do wireless. If one is already wireless, you want to do one that's not wireless. So if they've got a wireless microphone, that's fine. Record that on the board. The other one should not be wireless. Should just be a little body pack you give the person when they go up on stage. And that's pretty much it. I won't go any further than that, because then you're getting to more complicated scenarios. But minimum of 2 video cameras, preferably 2 audio recordings that are separate, one that's not wireless and one that can be wireless, recording off board. And then you want to sit down with someone or use Ripple training to learn how to use an NLE, to use like Final Cut Pro or DaVinci, and to learn how to sync the cameras up, sync the audio up, which can be done automatically pretty easily, and then make your final product in that. So essentially your product's being made, in the NLE, not in the room when you're recording. You're just gathering the ingredients in the room that you'll put together later on.
That's some great advice there. A thing that I would think about. Hopefully this sort of community event is something that is happening regularly, and if it is, it's amazing, right? Because you can just start really simple, and then just grow. Change one thing or add one thing each time. It's often the thing. I learned a lot of in my early days. I learned a lot in a church environment, because it was what's so amazing to be doing things every week, right? So just going back every week and doing something a little bit differently. But I would encourage you to remember the priority of audio, right? So, and you've heard this lots of times. We say it all the time, but it's, yourself that you will sit through bad video if the audio is great, but not vice versa. Like when the audio is terrible and the video can be amazing, it doesn't matter. You'll switch it off, right? Because it'll be the audio that we connect with the most. So concentrating on that, and having a really quality audio record, and that could just start with recording whatever's on the sound desk and just starting with that, and seeing how you go. But I agree with Tucker as well about backups, thinking about just multiple ways, because things happen, and it's often not a technical failure, it's a human failure, right? You forgot to press record, you bumped the record and it turned off, someone kicked the power out, whatever it is. It's often those things. And if you've got one thing, that's the other thing, these digital recorders, the SD card failed, or the whatever it is, right? One of the things that I've been doing lately, even on shows that don't necessarily need Zoom involved at all, as in Zoom video conferencing, I often just have a laptop now that I connect and run into a Zoom cloud recording, right? Because it creates a backup, to Tucker's point, that is passable, it's usable, and it's off-site, right? And so if you have a good enough internet connection that can maintain that, then now, even if the whole site goes down and blackout power and no backup power and all of that, I'll have this cloud recording that at least will go to that point, and I'll have that there as a backup. I've been doing that even with a camera or a screen capture of whatever's going to a projector or something as well. And so now I've kind of got something that I can work with. And then we often talk about having a lock-off camera, a safety shot. It's just a camera that sits there the whole time. You don't touch it. It's just a wide-ish shot of what's going on. And as a safety shot, you're always able to come back to that. No matter what happened with any other cameras, you've always got that. So if you had that wide shot, really good audio, and some sort of backup, you're in a really good spot for playing around with your recording. So give that a try. It's a good question. All the best with it. Oh, Courtney.
I was just, you were covering basically what I was going to say is, as a wide shot, if there's a DS, a group of people at the front, or a bunch of panelists, a wide shot that's static on them. And if you can afford them, a camera operator on a close-up shot that just follows whoever's talking, and be able to switch between the two of those will save your bacon many times. Plus, you can always go back to the wide shot if one of them fails, or if the guy who's operating the camera is on the wrong person at the wrong time. You can always have a cover shot you can go to, and also record in the cameras, and have enough media to make sure that you can record in the cameras as a backup, as well as taking the video output out of those cameras and hopefully recording a switched output over a switcher somewhere, in ATEM or some other type of recorder.
And then you just bring in an OB van, so a full truck, and
Right.
you have that, and get
And
the
a satellite
crew,
uplink truck.
Get a director.
satellite uplink, have a director, that's right, camera operators, audio operator, comms operator, assistant directors. It's just simple, very simple community
no
event.
big deal.
Yep, just
Arias,
20,
get some
20,
Arias.
30. Yeah, yeah, 20, 30 or so
Another
crew.
thing is to find out the names of all the people that are going to be participating that are on the panel, and make sure you write them down and get them spelled right. Because if you're going to have to do graphics later, you're going to be really up a creek if you don't have those names. You don't know who is that guy. Did anybody get that guy's name? How does he spell it? You know, you're going to have to put lower thirds. You may have to create graphics later with those people's names on them and lay them in. So make sure
business
that you.
cards. Yeah, it's a good one. It's
Yes,
asking business cards
collect
because you get their
business
title
cards.
as well. So yeah,
Do they still
That's a
have
good
business
idea.
cards?
the people who are on panels will probably have business cards.
Do make sure if you are recording on multiple different things, especially if audio is separate from video, make sure that your settings match.
It's not
Frame
the end of the world
rates.
if you don't, because you can just conform everything and then sync. But you need to conform everything first before you sync. But yeah, you do want to make sure that. But if you've got a recorder that only does 40, 44 100, so 44 1, then and everything else you have, you want to make 44 1. So you want to make, even if you go 48, it's better. But if you have one particular recorder that, maybe the desk or maybe a body pack can only do 44 1 for whatever reason, then you want to make sure they're all 44 1. But it's not the end of the world if you don't, because NLEs have no problem. Actually, you can bring it into Final Cut. It doesn't care what the bit rate is of the audio because it will conform it in the background. It does this. It essentially converts it into a WAV file before you even start editing it. So it doesn't really matter what, and it'll conform to whatever you do. So in, let's say, Final Cut, when you create a project, it asks you what bitrate do you want it to be, and any audio you put into that project will be conformed to that bitrate. So it's not the end of the world, but for absolute sync, it is better if you, at the recording stage, you have everything in the same format.
Also, if there's a real-time clock and the camera, even if you don't have time code, I mean, the best way is to put time code generators on the cameras and jam sync that to time code generator on your recorder. But if you don't have that covered, if you just, before you start, check a lot of cameras have real-time clocks in them, and that's what they use to date and time the files that they create on file-based recordings. And the same thing is true on most audio recorders, even if they're not time code based recorders. They a lot of times will have a time of day clock in there, and just make sure they're all set to the same time of day and the same time zone. And that'll get you in the neighborhood, and then you can fine tune the sync later in your editorial software. But as long as you have that way, when you're sorting the files and they're separate audio files and separate video files, you can just get them within a minute or so, and you'll know that, oh, that's probably the same tape.
What's funny is you're hearing from people that have got scars from not doing some of these things.
And how we fix those scars.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, oh, that really hurt. And now I've got to work really hard to fix it.
Frame rate's a good one. Make sure nothing's set on 24. So it's easy to move between 25 and 30. So if you accidentally have it on 25, if you, for whatever reason, and 30, there's actually a lot of systems that can easily move between those two. But 24 to 25 and 24 to 30 is quite obvious when you go between them. So, but yeah, so the frame rate. So a good example of that is if you're using iPhones, multiple iPhones, just make sure, because the iPhone's very easy to switch these kind of frame rates. You just touch on the corner and switch on what you want. I would set them to the highest frame rate. So I'd say 4K 60, if your phone can do 4K 60, and then you can bring it down to 4K 30 or 1080 30 in the NLE. As I said, you're generating ingredients you're going to be putting into a software. So it's no harm in getting more data than you may need later on, mainly because if you do 4K 30 and then you've got something that's 4K 50, they won't match up as easy as someone who did a 4K 50 and 4K 60, because it's very easy to turn a 4K 60 into a 50, much harder to turn a 30 into a 50. But yeah.
The only harm in recording more data than you need is you're going to run out of
Space,
storage.
yeah.
Storage space, yeah, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Consideration.
Make sure you get enough of that.
So if that hasn't put you off, Lois, with us getting into all the tech on that, I think the big thing is that you just do it, just start, just get on with it, and yeah, you said it was a community event. I assumed it was non-profit. I assume they have no budget, and that anything you do is a bonus, because they would have done events before that weren't recorded, and now they're going to do events that are recorded. And if you set a low bar in your expectations, and it's just trying to get something going, you'll learn a lot more by actually just doing it, and then asking a couple of things, like having one question. It's like, how do I improve this little thing, and not try to do it all at once. So, all right, next question.
Next one comes in from some guy named Grant Whitehead in Adelaide. And he says, I have the need for a NUC PC. What do you think of this? And he has a link to this NUC, which is DBSI. So
yeah,
go ahead, Grant.
the thing with this is that we do some on-site presentation management for some large conferences, and we're using some software that we've been using for a while. It's called Slide Crew, and it is a presentation file management system, which is really fancy. It's very, very cool. I met the guys in Amsterdam just before COVID, and we've been working with them ever since to improve this software. It's really cool. Anyway, the point is they've built a way of doing a local server, so it's all online. People can upload their presentations before they come on site. They can upload them, when they're on site. They can, manage versions, and they can all of that stuff. The individual speakers can do all of that. What's really cool is that they've created this ability to do a local server, basically a local caching server. And so when people are on site and they're providing their presentations, they'll just copy locally, and then they'll sync out to the CDN. So there could be, depending on the event size, there could be sort of 20, 30, 40 different machines that are all sort of talking to that local server, which is doing both data. It's a database server in a sense, as well as file management. And so the need then is likely to have decent RAM, for all of those computers that are connecting to the data.
The NUC is going to be your server, or is it going to be the individual machine contributing
to
the server?
The NUC can be the server, because it doesn't have to be crazy high CPU. It needs to have a decent amount of RAM, and needs to have a decent fast SSD, and likely to be at least 2.5 gig network. Even though most of the computers will be 1 gig, at least that gives a little bit of extra headroom going into the router and into a switch.
Does it need two NICs or not?
Well, it doesn't need it, but I am interested in that I see that there's lots that do have 2 NICs, and understanding understanding how Windows manages that. But yeah, Tucker, go ahead.
Yeah, I would. I think the MSI might work just fine. What I know would work just fine is the little super micro. They've got a bunch of really nice little 1U or half U servers. I've used them quite a bit. They're 8-core. Sometimes they're like real low power Xeon. They're legit little servers. And that's the direction I would go. Mainly, you're stepping out of the consumer space for device revisions and things like that, and more into the long-term standards. It's funny because I actually went and grabbed a couple things to have in arm's reach. That's not one of the ones I went to grab to have in arm's reach, but it's right over there. But they're great. And you can put
1RU rack.
Yeah, it's just a little one, but it's real narrow. I mean, they're real small, real compact. So the ability to put it into a not have an external power supply. It's a little thing. This one has I think 6 network ports on it. You can get them with SFP ports. You can do the copper, just SFP to SFP copper.
That's cool.
They're great. Anyways, that's the direction that I would go, is the super micro stuff. They're not expensive. Getting out of the consumer space for device revision though is really nice.
When you say not expensive, what sort of pricing?
And it may be noisy if it's a server. They tend to have small, loud fans.
That's true. They are not super quiet, but
I don't know. Put them in a server room somewhere.
And it depends on where it has to go. Yeah, that's right. And so part of it is too that sort of we're making everything, flight racks, that can go in little cases, Pelican cases, and off they go. And so weight is a big consideration, and size is as well. So I like the idea, but But yeah, I
mean,
just wonder what's needed.
yeah, the NUC you pointed to comes in a variety of different flavors there, different processors, different speeds. So you can configure it, choose the one that you want. But I found, these for doing glue stuff, I found these GMK Tech
I
for
know.
like $150.
I've
This
got
one,
I've got two of them from your recommendation, and I love it.
yeah,
They
they
work brilliantly. I've got one
and this one
that
is running.
has
This one's running. DaVinci Resolve,
yeah yeah
19.1. So, they are capable, and for $150, they're great. They're throwaways, and that one's been running Resolve I've had it up for about 5 or 6 days, and so it's still running fine. So, overheating and throttling doesn't seem to be a problem with that one because it has a little small fan that'll kick in if it gets overheated, and it won't throttle.
yeah. No, they power by USB-C as well, and so I've even ran one of those off of a power bank, just and made it totally portable. It was amazing. And the thing that is really cool about those is that I'm able to slot them into a rack, a small flight rack, and now it's just a utility machine that I can splash top into. Don't have to worry about VPNs or anything.
Headless, yeah, just
Yeah,
headless and stuff on your network with a gigabit Ethernet port on it.
yeah, yeah. And then
And they run
so we've got
NDI. They're cheaper than a NDI to network NDI to HDMI converter because they have two HDMI ports on them, and they run NDA monitor and two instances on it. So they're $150 cheaper than the $300 single channel NDI converter.
yeah. I have thought about that because the thing that I want to check is if I can do a cluster of local servers. And if I could do that, then why wouldn't I just have 4 or 6 of those just running? And now instead of a bus, I've got 6 cars. Yeah, that could work, but I don't know how well they would sort of talk to each other. But and the RAM is one thing I'd probably, if there's quite a few clients connecting, then doing 32 gig or 64 gig or something like that might be worth it. So anyway, we'll see. But then I have seen those super micros around a little bit too, so that is making me think. So
I regularly run like VMware on 2 of them and have a little have multiple hosts that I'll push between them, put 64 gigs of RAM in them, and it's just a tiny little cluster.
That's cool. Nice. That was a bit for me to think about. Basically, I just assembled everyone here tonight just to answer that one question for me. So I'm happy to go now. No. Next question.
Next one comes in from Tommy Shantz. He said, "What would be a good failover for wired IP failure? Good, better. I can't afford the best, but let me know what you folks use."
Carl?
So I'm going to answer this question 2 things. So the failover, I'm guessing you mean a different ISP. So Starlink would be a good one. If we're talking ISP, if you're talking about the device that can handle the failover, then I look at Ubiquiti. Ubiquiti have probably about 10 devices now in their gateway and their cloud gateway ecosystem that enable 2 WAN ports to be connected at the same time. So if you just take a look at we have the Dream Machine, of course, but there are many others now. They have their gateway, Cloud Gateway Pro, Cloud Gateway Ultra, the Gateway Pro, the Gateway Max. So there's a lot of products now in their range that enable 2 WAN ports to be connected, and for a failover, so if one fails, it would simply switch over to the other one. So that's if you're looking for a device that actually handles a failover. As far as a second device or a second ISP, Starlink would probably be one of the best ones now. As far as a failover, because it's not based on anything that could happen to the cables. So if you have 2 running down the same cables, and a truck outside your house hits a power cable and it knocks out that cable, then you're out. So it doesn't matter which ISP you've got. Starlink is probably a good one for that. The other way is to do a microwave connection in your area. So if you don't want to go down the Starlink route, then microwave connection you'll find that in your area you generally have some form of microwave internet. available to you, usually in most built up or semi-built up areas. That's another way to go as well, fine. But it really depends on like which side we're talking here. We're talking the ISP as a backup, or we're talking about a machine that can handle the switchover for the backup. But yeah, and then of course, you know, a Nighthawk, you know, an M6 Nighthawk that uses, you know, cellular radios, you know, anything that uses cellular radios is another form of backup. But again, that can be spotty in your area. Depends on, you know, what it is you need. But yeah, so using cellular signals as well can be another way of doing it.
Good one. Tucker's doing some show and tell.
Right.
Yeah.
Did have to go run and grab it, but it's Pepwave Max BR1. Sorry, this one is the Max Transit Duo. We use Pepwave a lot, and what the consideration for us is whenever you need the failover to be actually seamless, where like no packets dropped, that's when you get into like Pepwave type stuff, where it's not just giving you 2 internet connections. This one will give you 2 cell-based connections. You can use Wi-Fi as WAN as another option. And then you can also use wired network interfaces. So you can combine all of that into one tunnel, and then using Speed Fusion, all the data across all of them. If you lose one of those connections, it's fine. Like the system will continue to work. There won't be the downtime that you get with a lot of different services where like, oh my gosh, we've detected a failure. You're now offline. Wait, now it's recovering. Now you're back online. So that's the reason why we use Pepwave. And there are other options that do that, but they just do it better than a lot.
What's the difference with Pepwave and Peplink? Peplink is the brand and Pepwave is models, or
yes.
Yeah. So I bought recently the BR. I bought 2 of the BR1s, B1. And so that I've got 2 of them in those flight racks I was talking about. 2 Ethernet WAN ports, 1 cellular modem, as in it's not just taking a cellular input, but it is a modem. You just put a SIM card in it, and then you can put your phone on it as well, which gives you another one. And as Tucker said about the Wi-Fi as WAN, so it depends on what you're doing. Now they're only $300 US, which is very good. I mean, there is a little bit of ongoing costs if you want to, and of course I think you would want to do Speed Fusion. So I give you a couple of examples of where I've used that. I've got a much bigger one that I run here. I can't remember what that is, but something 2 BR2, I think it is. So that's got 2 cellular modems in it, 5G modems in it. And so how I've used it here is done lots of Zoom sort of based events, and really needed it to be rock solid as it goes out. You know, the end broadcast is going back into Zoom, and so it's important if I'm doing a mix here that I want that to go back into Zoom in a redundant way. And so in the Speed Fusion way, doing WAN smoothing you spoke about, it's pushing them out over all the connections and just taking the fastest one at the time. And so that's worked really nicely for me. But I just had another use case for this, which might be what you're talking about a bit as well, is I just did a little conference at a venue that cellular was a little sketchy, and the Wi-Fi was okay, but a little bit sketchy. And so I wasn't live streaming. I wasn't doing any Zoom or anything like that. I just needed some internet, as you do, right? For pulling down some files or, you know, whatever it is. And so I spun up Speed Fusion, created the tunnel for all the clients that were sitting on it. I had Wi-Fi as WAN coming in, and I had cellular coming in. And now I had a robust connection that was taking those 2 slightly inconsistent connections and giving me one. Wasn't super fast, but it was rock solid. And that's and so that's been a real game changer as I've gone into that sort of the PepLink world. I've now got 3 of them, and I've found that to work really well. So if you don't have budget even for that, there is a thing called Speedify. People have used that a little bit, which varying results, but I've actually had some pretty good results from it before I had the PepLinks. Speedify, it's just a subscription, and it'll take as many of the connections that you have on your computer and push them through to basically a VPN through to their servers, and bring it all back together and create one pipe. And so if you had your phone connected and you had your Ethernet connection connected and whatever else, it would make that one pipe. And now, in the same way we were talking before about how that works with failover, it's very, very quick. You wouldn't notice it if you can literally just pull the Ethernet cable out and you'll see that nothing was affected. So that's the type of thing that you can do with some software. And they actually had the Speedify, and I think they had Connectify or something like that. They had this like sister product, which was essentially a software router. And so you can share that Speedify connection back out of a computer into a router, right? Into like just a simple Wi-Fi router, and now everything on that network is seeing that one Speedify connection. So it's possible to do a lot of these things on a very, very low budget to be able to make all that work. But anyway, did anyone else? Courtney?
I had a question. I think I remember Grant demoing the ATEM software with ATEM minis and the mini extremes. Doesn't it have failover to a cell phone? If you have a cell phone, you get your regular Ethernet port, and you can plug a cell phone into the USB port and use that as a failover. Does it do that automatically? I've never tried it. Or
yeah, it does. I mean, it's still picking up an IP. Of course, it's not doing a VPN or any sort of bonding.
It's not bonding the two together, but if one
so
fails,
you'll have a little bit of downtime, but it works. Totally
right.
works, and you can see it switch over. It's really impressive because they had these USB-C ports on these things. So the web presenters and the ATEM minis all will do this. You've got an Ethernet connection as a primary, and then you can have a cell connection as a secondary. And I played around with it, and I think within a few seconds it had switched across, and then it had picked up again. Away it goes, and it can actually do some in those devices that they do have a cache as well, and so it can buffer a little bit when the packets are not going out, and then it can send those packets again. So it doesn't mean that you're not. It doesn't mean that you're not losing a connection, but in theory, you could potentially still have all the frames intact.
And does it have enough power going over the USB to keep your phone charged from going dead?
Yeah.
So it's good. So backup power too.
So, oh, our battery's gone flat. Yeah. No, it does provide power as well. So there's some pretty cool things in this space now. But yeah, as Carl said, Starlink's a real game changer too. I had Starlink coming in as my second WAN. And the really cool thing is too, when you start being able to manage VLANs or sort of multiple networks. I'm at home here. I've got 3 kids and a bunch of stuff, bunch of devices that are very chatty. They're all on a separate VLAN. When I go into production mode, I flick a switch, and now all the home network goes out Starlink, right? And so everyone's still happy. They're still watching Netflix and whatever. It's totally fine. They don't care. But I have the fiber connection is dedicated to me, and it just hasn't had a bunch of packets going over unnecessarily. And the Starlink is still a backup for me if other things fail as well. But It's been a really cool way because it's unlimited as well. Like it's a great way of doing it. So anyway, it's a good question. Let us know how you go. Next question.
Next question comes in from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Seattle, Washington. He says, is there any point A that is too far from a point B for a remote collaboration? And is there a situation where latency is just too high? I suspect that you just have to think of that time in system design.
Carl?
So it depends. Like if they're just a contributor, so let's say it's a contributor to a news program. So simply, if you ask the question to someone and you want a response, if that person's sitting on the moon, that's 2.5 seconds. So 2.5 second round trip from the Earth to the moon. So that's probably the longest you're ever going to see, probably in our lifetimes, with this type of contribution. We will probably see people on Mars in our lifetime, but that contribution would take 4 minutes minimum to get there and 24 minutes maximum, so depending on where we are in our orbits. But the moon is 2.5 seconds. So I'll use the moon as an example, as like an extreme example. 2.5 seconds, we actually see 2.5 seconds in some poorly orchestrated satellite links already. So this is all relay stations. So people, before satellite, we have relay, which went across the land, and these relay stations across the lands would sometimes be up to 3 seconds. Where you ask them, and this is where stingers came in back in the day. So you ask a question, then they put up the station stinger, and that covers the delay time. So the person's actually answering in real time when they hear the question, but that stinger, that network stinger, whatever you want to call it, goes up. And then, so I think if it's just contributing that way, yes. But if we're talking about contributing as far as control, like you want someone controlling the lights, controlling the audio, doing vision switching, then no, you do want that down to probably 1/4 second. So essentially, you'd want to be on the same continent. So I think if people are contributing in that way, being on the same continent for kind of real time, like vision switching, audio control can be a little bit delayed, but lighting cues, those kind of things, if you want to do that remotely, then being on the same continent would help. Let's say I'm here in Australia, I'm trying to control something in the United States, that could be between 1/2 second to 1 second, depending on how we set up the network for control. So that would not be what I would call real time. So maybe audio, because audio doesn't have to be real time. Unless you're switching between audio, like you're writing the faders, quote unquote, then that would want to be more real time. But other than writing the faders, audio can be done in a little bit more of a delay fashion. But other things like vision switching and stuff like that, you'd want to be either in the same city or on the same continent at least. But for contributing, just like how we do here, how we're talking here, it's not really a big problem because we can cover it up because we're all used to, for the last 30, 40 years, seeing satellite links and relay links for contributors who are live in the field. So it's not uncommon to us to expect a slight pause between the person responding to a question from the studio.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with everything that you just said. I mean, it's really a lot of it's a matter of setting expectations and making sure people are understand what's coming. We do shows. It's funny. I see Jonas in the comments, and this is 100% true. I don't know that he's ever like in the yeah. He's always in a different place, different continent than where the equipment that's being run is. We from like what Carl was saying, from people speaking and that kind of collaboration, I think that the technology is there now. As long as it fits into the expectations for the clients, then the technology is there to make sure that good conversations can happen anywhere on the globe. You definitely don't want to bring someone in and say, you're now on the platform, have the conversation live, go. You want to make sure they have 15, 20 minutes to converse with each other and get comfortable with that so that the tech drops away, and gets them to a spot where they can have their conversation as they need to. And again, after 10 or 15 minutes of speaking with each other on the platform, they'll be used to whatever delay exists. They'll get the pacing and how much time they need to wait for each other down. As far as remote technicians, we've done, it's funny because Carl, like you were saying, we've done things with Grant's team where his team is cutting shows on systems that are in a data center in the States. And it's worked very, very well. It is something you have to get used to. Same thing. You want to make sure you sit down, you get your hands on the controls, you use it for a little bit of time, understand what those delays are like, and make sure that you don't have the kind of cuts where it's like, if quarter of a second is a problem, then you may need to make another plan. One of the things that we will do often is we will locate the switching center, the switching core, in a data center that is regionally closer to the technicians typically, because of that, to make sure the technician experience is inside of the range of not just doable, but comfortable. We want to make sure that that's something where they're relaxed in their seat doing their thing. So,
Connie?
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree with everyone else's opinion. The 2-second delay, you'll see it every night on the nightly news when they're interviewing someone. That you'll even sometimes hear their IFB, the last, and the person will ask the question, and you'll hear that question end over the IFB and the person on the other end's headset. The main thing that you just kind of wait that little pregnant pause. You realize that it's going to be after you ask your question, it's going to be 2 seconds before the person starts his answer. What that runs into problems with is if the latency gets above about half a second and you have multiple people that are contributing and we're not controlling who speaks like we are here with a moderator, that people tend to interrupt each other and then they realize they've interrupted each other. And so they both stop and then they both start again because they think, and that delay just keeps that restart happening every 2 seconds. And that's especially bad if they're bouncing off a geostationary satellites, because they're further out than those Starlinks that are low Earth orbit. So the latency is much higher for the broadcast satellites that are up there.
Yeah, I think you see when people are particularly experienced at it, you have an anchor and a reporter, and you see the way they speak. They leave no gaps in what they're saying. They're not saying, "Hi, Courtney, how are you?"
I'm fine.
Good, thank you. Yeah, it's like, really? Like, you don't waste a question like that. It's like, Courtney, it's great to have you here. Tell us about what's happening there. Like, bang straight into the first question, and then a succinct answer, and then a succinct question. And so the gap isn't such a problem. But when you're stepping on each other, like you said, that's when it becomes a problem.
And especially if you're doing a news segment, you may have 3 minutes allowed for this window of this person's interview on the satellite, and if you ask a lot of questions, that little 2 seconds builds up, a lot of delay, and it'll lead into your time that you have with that person in the long run. If you're asking a lot of questions and you're not doing, as Grant said, is get all your questions out once and let them string all their answers together.
Yeah, I'm finding I'm less tolerant now of these quick what's the term, like these snippets that you're kind of getting of things, because I'm used to now listening to Joe Rogan podcasts that go for 3.5 hours. I think the last one I just saw was 4.5 hours, which is just unreal. But there's more and more of these now. They're just long form discussions that you're like, okay, yeah, I really want to get into the topic. I don't want sound bites. I want something more than that. So anyway, I think that the only other thing that I would say is that there is a few times that I have dealt with some islands or smaller countries that you do a speed test, and this is the thing with speed tests. They do a speed test. They're like, yeah, I'm getting 500 up and down. I was like, awesome. You're getting that to the ISP, which is, just down the road. Change the server settings and put it to LA or put it to Sydney or put it to London and tell me what they are. And so I often do those sorts of tests. And inevitably, it's like, oh, I'm getting 7 up to London, or I'm getting, 3 up to LA. It's like, okay, so now that's telling me more about what's going on about the pipe that's leaving the country. And sometimes Starlink, and I'm still working this out a little bit. Starlink can help depending on where their up point is, or downlink, So if the downlink could be in another country, which is possible, depending on how far away they are, it may be a faster way out than what's going on, the fiber connections off the country, or that sort of thing. So there's a lot to that, but generally, I think the answer is no. I don't think there is a point A that's too far away from point B. There's always a way now,
With the exception of Mars.
Right.
Say Mars, but other than Mars, yeah, we're fine.
I ran into an interesting one on we did some election coverage work, and we had I don't know, maybe 30 different guests throughout. And one of the guests did, I think, 2 hits throughout, and that one guest was on a live view and everyone else was Zoom contribution. And that was a situation where it was interesting because we were so, host and everyone was so used to the Zoom contribution speed. When we hit that live view, it was always a hitch. It was always a everything slowed down, and everyone was really good at handling it, but you could definitely feel that hit. So yeah, I would say it depends, but everything can be dealt with from a latency perspective, I think, at this point. But if everyone is in one mode and then one is not, that's tough.
Yeah, agreed. It's inconsistent. All right, next question. We've got a few questions now. We've got
coming in here. Robert
Yeah,
Shoji in Los Angeles, California says, for the panelists, what is the next major piece of hardware you're planning on purchasing in the coming months?
Carl.
So for me, it's probably a camera. So the camera I'm looking at will be the R5 Mark II, $6,500 in Australia. I don't think it's going to go any cheaper on Black Friday. So it is a pretty big investment for a single camera. For me to actually upgrade my system, it's actually $25,000 Australian. So that's just 2 bodies and 3 lenses, $25,000. So it's a bit of a major investment. But I would start with 1 body only, because all my lenses, this is the beauty of Canon, all the EF lenses, of course, work with the RF bodies, and they actually improve the lenses. So the EF lenses actually work better on an RF body than they do on a native EF body. So, but yeah, that'll probably be my next major investment as far as what I do for a living, would be the R5 Mark II.
And Courtney, as a retiree, is it just your next meal? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I look forward to that. Yeah, what I look forward to is not buying stuff, but unloading stuff. That's my major problem. I've got way too much equipment now that I'm not using. I've never used. I bought to test it out or to analyze the file format, or just to research and development stuff, and it's piling up in storage. And you look at that storage bill every month, and I'm paying some of this stuff. You're paying $300 a month to store something that's worth $50 at
Right.
months up, and you realize, how long have I had this in storage, and how much is it? Yeah. So I'm not necessarily looking at any new hardware purchases, although I'm always a sucker for some new, something really cheap that does something really good. So I'm always got an eye out on Amazon for cheap
little
stuff.
mini
That
PC.
may change. Those of you that are in the United States, I suggest buy up anything on Amazon or at Walmart that is made in China over the next few months, because after the beginning of the year, it may be going up 60% on just about everything that is made in China or in other foreign countries, other than, the good old USA.
You talk about storage. I heard recently that the storage industry is bigger than the whole entertainment, like Hollywood industry, movie industry. It's just amazing. Just storing all your old stuff.
I keep my equipment in the climate controls vaults, where they store a lot of nitrate film and a lot of film in Hollywood. And then I was getting some equipment out, and the guy said, they sold a building. So there's all these vaults full of film that next year I think they're going to have to find another place to go.
Wow.
So there's going to be quite a fire sale
probably
going on.
Head off to Utah with the salt mines. So.
Yeah, a salt mine somewhere. But getting, the problem is when you store production equipment, this is a problem in Hollywood. I don't know if take a little side trip just for a second. The problem in my neighborhood is there are no storage facilities that are open 24 hours, except for these vaults where they have to pull film out in the middle of the night to do edit and transfers and cleanups and things, because people end up living in them.
Yeah.
So if they're, the homeless go, oh, look, I can rent a nice place to stay that locks and keep my stuff there for, $150 a month. Where else can you find that in LA? So, yeah, so all of them close at a certain time. All the storage facilities in LA, other than these climate control vaults, close at a certain time. It's become a real big problem.
Tucker, you buying anything?
Just bought Makito X4. We're working on our workflows and kind of what empowers those workflows, and so there's a lot going into that. There's potentially some additional equipment, routers and things coming, but right now I think our last big one for a little while is this X4.
What was the ballpark on that? The price of that?
More than I should say. It's about 12.
Yeah, $12. It's very cheap. It's good.
Yeah,
Well,
roughly.
for that little thing you held in your hand.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
And what about you, Grant? What are you
It's all
buying?
quality.
You running over there to Black Magic and
I
getting
don't-
whatever the latest is
Yeah,
coming up?
that's right. No, I think it's probably more just a Mac. I'll change over my Mac Studio and MacBook Air. We just bought an M3 Pro MacBook Pro, and the difference is staggering to me about the between the Air. I've been used to the Air for so long, and the weight to the Pro is significant. And I don't do enough on the Air of really intense work to justify the extra weight. So I've really converted on that, because I used to just think the Air wasn't powerful enough, but it totally is. I've got the M2, and I've never had a problem where I'm like, this is too slow. This is too slow. It really is amazing. The architecture. So you can imagine an M4 Air would be great. That's probably what I'll upgrade to and hand the old one down. That'll be the next thing. All right, next question.
From Bo Cortle, and he asked, is it possible to use an Apple Vision Pro with a Mac Mini and no other monitor? Do you need a monitor to tell the Mac Mini to share over the AVP?
So yes and yes. So as in, it is possible to do it with nothing, and I know I'm on some forums. I recently did the beta upgrade on the AVP and my MacBook Air, so that I could do ultra wide virtual display in the Apple Vision Pro, and it's amazing. It's really, really cool. So it's really, really wide. It's basically like 4K, but it's not that in resolution, but it feels like that in size, if that makes sense. And so it's something like 6,000 pixels wide or something. But and I have heard people that have got the new Mac Mini and then have done that, and it works fine. Arguably, even on the Mac, that having a dummy HDMI little dongle in there that'll just trigger the way that the GPU works is worth it. So, but because of the way it's doing that virtual display anyway is different. It's not doing a pixel for pixel. It's different. It's more like
It's AirPlay.
AirPlay.
It's a operating system level version of AirPlay.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So yeah. And let me know, Bo, have you got a Vision Pro? I'm keen to do another Vision Pro show. We did one where we use the avatars. I don't care so much about that, but I'll just have all the panelists that have Vision Pro to kind of talk about that. All right, next question.
Well, I guess we've come down to, Robert Shoji, what is the least expensive new full-frame Sony camera capable of basic filmmaking tasks?
Carl?
So there's two. If you've got the newest A7C, C for cat, and then there's the A7 III. So these two will be under 1,500, they're between 1,000, 1,500, depending if you get them on special. Perfectly fine. You know, they'll do video perfectly fine. You know, pretty much anything you need. But yeah, so the A7C and the A7 III, they're the two you want to look at.
Good one. Last question, guys.
All right. Robert Shoji in Los Angeles says, what under $1,000 monitor would you recommend for a new M4 Mac Mini? Need something that has decent color accuracy out of the box.
Carl?
So I'm going to break the rule and say over 1,000, that's going to be the studio display. So that's 1,500, but that has like actual profiles that are built in.
Just because Alex isn't here doesn't mean you have to give the types of answers he would give.
I would go to the manufacturer of the Apple Studio display, and that'd be LG. They manufacture the panel, and they do have their fine, the ultrafine series. So I believe the ultrafine series, there is an $800 version of the ultrafine, which is not the 5K. I believe it's a 4K version, but it has the same, well, it has similar profiles that you can go into. It has P3, sRGB, so it has these profiles, 709. So that's the other one. So LG make the Apple display, or make the panel, and some of the circuitry for it. But I would look at the ultrafine series from LG. I believe they started around $800. So that would be the only other one I would suggest that if you want out of the box without using a calibration software.
Nice. Let's see. Yeah. So the thing I recommend, I've bought about 6 of these, and it's the Samsung M7. I think there might be an M8 now as well. So it's a 4K 32-inch screen, and I really like that. That's a really good sweet spot. So I've got 2 of them in front of me here, and the 32-inch size at 4K I think it looks really good. The color's great. The added advantage with them is that they are also a smart TV. Which I didn't think that I'd use, but occasionally I have. So they have a remote, and it's got all of the apps, and you can just run Netflix on it or whatever. And so I've used it sometimes when I have guests staying. I can just give them a TV just by bringing a monitor in, and now away they go. They can use that, which means it's got speakers, which is handy sometimes. And it's also got some PC functionality in it, so you can actually run all of the Office apps and things like that. It's got USB ports. You plug a keyboard and mouse into it, and it's now a PC. But most of the time, I'm just using it as a monitor. It's got USB-C that has power delivery of 60 watts, and yeah, I just every time I go to buy one, once I've smashed probably 3 of them. When you travel around with them and things, it's easy to do. And I set one up at a show one time, and it was a seat, one of these moving desk chairs with handles on it. And you got to watch this, the ones that they go down a little bit when you sit on them. And so then I turn around to leave, and the handle goes underneath the table, and then you get up, and it lifts and tipped my table over and smashed my screen. It had been there for an hour, and I was on site for a week. That wasn't a great day. But then I look at all the options, and I come back to the Samsung M7. I'm super happy with that size. So I think you'd be really happy with an M4 with a Mac Mini. It'd be an amazing little experience. So that's my recommendation. All right. So now we're on to content recommendations from the people. We've ran out of time, Carl, to do ChatGPT versus Carl. But
that's all right.
What's your recommendation?
So my recommendation is a little bit in the zeitgeist of what's happening in the United States at the moment, I guess. So for people who want to lighten the mood a little bit, it's going to be the Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister series. So here you can get your fix of politics, but have a good laugh while you do it. And you may see that things that happen now have always happened. So this series was done in the early 80s, so 79 through to 86, I believe. So the Margaret Thatcher years in the UK, but of course we have a fictional minister and a fictional prime minister in this series. But you may actually see some things in this series that may reflect modern times of how bureaucrats and politicians speak, and the hilarious situations they find themselves in to essentially get what they want done, regardless of of what other people may want. So yeah, the Yes Minister and the Yes Prime Minister series. It's a very good laugh. You'll find it on, I believe, on the BBC streaming service in the United States. I have it on DVD here, but yeah, so it's a very good series, and they're pretty much isolated episodes, so you can jump around the seasons. It won't really matter. So most of those episodes you can just watch in any order.
Good one. I've got one trivia question for you that I got ChatGPT. In what year did the first email ever get sent? Who sent it? And what was the content of the message?
I'm pretty sure it was 1971. I don't know the guy's name, but I'm pretty sure that
Spot on.
I can't remember what the content. I can't remember what the
1971.
actual content was. But if I remember, it was something like "Did this work?" from memory. It was something like that kind of thing from memory. But I remember how he chose the @ symbol as well. But I know it was 1971.
I think we bet. Yes, you're exactly right. It's 1971. And they said it was Ray Tomlinson, and the message was, and it says message was likely QWERTY UIOP.
So he did the top line of the keyboard.
Yeah, just top line of the keyboard. Yeah. Yeah. All right, well done. You got the year, which is always remarkable to me. How that just your RAM in your brain is remarkable. All right. Courtney, a content.
I don't know if I told this last time as far as The Franchise, which is an HBO series, half-hour comedy series, and it's about it's behind the scenes on the making of a franchise film, like Spider-Man, that kind of Marvel franchise.
You did say that, but I'm glad you did, because I haven't gone to it yet. So yeah.
And the other thing, since I did recommend that before, the other thing I stumbled across a couple of nights ago is, Jim Cameron. This Jim Cameron video was a special video message he did at SCSP on AI and Robotics Summit. And he does this 17-minute little soliloquy, diatribe right into camera. But it's interesting on AI. This is the guy, of course, who invented Skynet, so he should know something about the fears that AI will be the end of society, and so he has his opinions on that. And it's and he's Jim Cameron, he's usually pretty full of himself, and if you've ever met him, but this he seems to be fairly humble and in announcing what he thinks. He doesn't think it's going to be a problem with AI.
Yeah,
so
he explains it in a logical path. That's right. It's quite an amazing watch. Yeah, it's a logical path he goes through. So you will follow it, and he will show multiple sides of what may happen and why people think multiple sides happen. But Courtney's right. That is a great thing to watch.
It's a good thing.
Okay, what do you got?
All right. I generally will watch something like Stay Tuned, which is a car YouTube guy named Tony Angelo. It's kind of Pennsylvania low buck punk rock. It's real fun. Just kind of out there thrashing, doing funny things with cars. And then anything with Eddie Izzard. I'm a fan. So
good ones. I've got one from 1981. It's a documentary called Raw. Just
it's not a documentary, unfortunately. It's
right.
It may look like a home movie. No,
yeah, right.
The only home shot in Panavision widescreen anamorphics.
I actually have a copy of it that I haven't watched yet, and I'm super keen since I heard years ago when you first spoke about it. I am keen to go back over
there. Is a documentary too called Roar, the most dangerous movie ever made, and I
right
in that one.
Can we do a watch party, Grant? Could we do a watch party?
That would be cool.
I think we should absolutely do a watch party
and have Courtney with commentary. Yeah, that would be fun.
Yes, I'll be waking up in night terrors after that.
That's right. He's tried to block it out of his memory.
Give him the telestrator. You see here.
That's right. There's
Inside the frame here was a guy holding on to a tiger that he let go right as the shot ended. Yes.
I want you to circle every extra who lost a limb.
yeah, man.
Yes.
There's a series that I've just started watching, the Day of the Jackal, which it looks is really cool. And it was one of those times where there was 6 episodes there, and I was like, oh sweet, it's just like a mini series. It'll all be done. I got to the end of episode 6, and then it was like next episode coming out on Thursday. I'm like, like sometimes you just don't want to be spoon fed. You just want it to be done, and unfortunately, but it is
Binge
very
watch
good.
only. Yes.
Yeah, it is very good. All right. Thank you each to the panelists. We had a good discussion. It was great to have you, Tucker. I hope to be able to have you here again. And also, I just want to remember all the people. Our TD today was Peter, and the question manager Alan, and Taylor was looking after a bunch of stuff. I know that Jeff was working in the background as well, 1F Jeff. And so I just want to say a big thank you all to them. We keep playing around with this, and to Viz Vector, we're still bashing on it and seeing how we can make it work and how we can break it and things like that. And it's working really well. So, but yeah, big thanks to Taylor for quarterbacking the whole thing. So awesome. We'll catch you next week. But there was a couple of questions that we pushed back. We didn't have enough time for, and they'll likely just post them again because post them tomorrow morning, because we're in the separate Makana. It won't be sitting in the office hours one. But if you just post it again for the 7 o'clock Pacific morning show, then you can get questions answered then. Awesome. Bye bye, everyone.
Nighty night.